I'm standing in for our chairperson, so I drew the short straw about half an hour ago. My name is Chris Harper. I'm a member of the board. I'm actually a property owner, representative. I'm also on the finance committee and the executive committee. This should take about 10 minutes. So we'll start with the BCLT financials, 2026 year to date, as of the end of February 2026. Income is $7,891.62. Interest income is $225.61. Expenses, $38,062.04, and net income is a loss of $29,944.81. Our balance is $50,929.70. Any questions? In the past year, on June 30th, 2025, BCLT placed the 83.5 acre River Run Farm into trust with the first farmer-owned leasee, Anna Houston and Rob Biazzo, of the off-the-shelf farm, officially starting on April 1st, 2026. We will be fundraising to pay off the seller's mortgage so we can acquire other properties with the approximate $160,000 left to raise. So it'd be greatly appreciated, any donations. CLT Southern Berkshires and BCLT now hold the River Run property. On November 1st, Beth Carlson stepped into a newly created executive director position. Beth hopes to build on the solid foundation built by Susan Witt and the many volunteers and board members over the years. We'd also like to briefly acknowledge David Fix. David has left the organisation for greater things. Contributions to both CLT Southern Berkshires and BCLT over the past years. Janice, who's here, is up the back there, Boverstock, has resigned from the board, which is really sad for her to be leaving us, has made a great contribution, and we thank her very much. Toby, who's here tonight, Doris, and Jonathan Fertile terms were temporarily continued until this meeting. Any nominations from the floor? Thank you. No nominations. Today we vote to extend Jonathan and Sam's terms to November of 2026, at which time 2026 elections will be held. All in favour? All opposed? Thank you. We affirm the leaseholders' election results, extending Toby Doris to serve another term, and welcome Sam Miller as a new leaseholder representative board member. Sam has a property on Forest Row, and he will be a valuable contributor to the board. Our newly formed projects committee will be reviewing several housing, farming and mixed use property opportunities for acquisition in the next year. And our events and outreach community is planning some exciting events. Please reach out to Beth if you would like to be involved. And Beth is sitting in front here, and she would love you to get involved. CLTSB meeting, financials as of the end of February 2026. In the past year, 16 Forest Row was sold to a new owner, leasee. 9 Forest Row is under contract, and Orchard House on Avastra is under contract. Samba and Sound, Janice, Toby, Jonathan, terms will be temporarily continued until the next meeting. Thank you very much to Janice once again. Janice lives in the same neighbourhood as I do in Forest Row, and she's absolutely amazing. It's going to be quite a loss. Today we vote to extend Jonathan and Sam's terms to November of 2026, at which time 2026 elections will be held. All in favour? All opposed? Carried. We affirm the leaseholders' election results, extending Toby the Rees to serve another term, and welcome Sam Miller as a new leaseholder representative board member. CLT Southern Berkshires, income $15,030.50, expenses $10,430.40, net income of $4,610, a balance of $28,864.39. Meeting closed. Somebody up front translate. I'm sorry.
9 Forest Road is on the market.
Yes, so that's under contract, isn't it?
No.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
So if it's on the market, that means if people are interested, they should reach out?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Thanks, Janice.
Thanks, Janice. Any other questions?
Thanks so much, Chris, for saving us and stepping in at the last minute. Just for those who aren't aware of the nonprofit structure for Community Land Trust of the Southern Berkshires and Berkshire Community Land Trust, they are sister organizations. So they share the board, but they have separate board meetings, separate financials, and so that's why we do sort of a redundant process for that. Just some really brief remarks. Welcome. It's really wonderful to see you all here tonight. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a survey. Please raise your hand if you are positive that you are active in your Berkshire Community Land Trust membership. Thank you very much. Your support is vital to our work. Please raise your hand if you think you are, but you're not sure. Please reach out to me and I will confirm. How many aren't but are willing to join or renew? I want to see a lot of hands now. Awesome. Thank you so much. Your commitment and your willingness to support our efforts really makes a big difference for the organization. I'm going to give a really flash update because we're really excited to get to today's panel. So our Events and Outreach Committee has some super interesting things in the works for this year. Please stay tuned. In June, we have 2 bird walks on River Run Farm, one with Great Barrington Land Conservancy, one with Berkshire Bird Observatory. Please check out our website. Registration is required for those events. We got a little behind on our annual meetings, so this year we're having 2 annual meetings. This is actually the 2025 meeting, and the 2026 meeting will be on November 11th, and Bill McKibben will be coming to speak. So please stay tuned, because I know you'll want to attend that. Our projects committee will be reviewing and discussing several potential farming, housing, and mixed-use projects in the near future, so stay tuned for what is on the forefront there. So I don't know if you are feeling what I'm feeling, but I'm feeling sort of almost battered and bruised by the daily bombardment of news, beloved local businesses closing, the cost of living, the fear of losing neighbors and friends, and just more. This is a really exhausting time. Tonight's panel highlights the work of 4 different community organizations and shows what we can do in our community to create a strong, resilient, and healthy county. These organizations are our partners and our friends, complementing our land access work for housing, farming, and local business. We hope you leave tonight strengthened and renewed, because just being together can be a radical act. And now I'm going to introduce our moderator and panelists. You guys want to come on up? So Katie Sparks is a dear friend of mine and our moderator tonight. She brings a deep lived perspective to the intersection of food, leadership, and sustainability. Raised in Vermont's Champlain Valley, her early connections to land, foraging, and local food systems has shaped a 25-plus career in New York's culinary world, where she rose to executive chef and now advises businesses through her counseling practice. Today, her work spans nutrient-dense, locally rooted food systems and executive leadership, guiding teams and organizations through meaningful evolution. Brittany Ebeling, right here, from Berkshire Environmental Action Team, is the new executive director. Brittany has worked as an advocate on climate justice issues, collective land ownership models, and sustainable food systems. She has an undergraduate degree in international economics and peace studies from the University of Notre Dame and a master's in urban policy from Sciences Po Paris. Brittany lives in Sheffield, Massachusetts, where she co-owns Little Bean Farm and Pantry, where she and her partner Ben grow unique heirloom dry beans. We also have with us tonight Margaret Moulton, the executive director of Berkshire Grown, where she works with her staff and community partners to help create a thriving local agricultural economy by expanding direct market opportunities for local farmers, raising awareness and understanding of the issues challenging our local food system, and making fresh local food available to all members of the community, especially families facing food insecurity. Jim Harwood is the president of the board of the Community Development Corporation of the Southern Berkshires. Trained as an architect, he relocated to the Berkshires with his family in 2007 and started his own practice. He was drawn to the region by its wealth of natural and cultural resources. He has worked with CDC SB for 15 plus years, helping to build community and drive economic development in the Berkshires, one apartment at a time. Dennis Iodice, the president of Berkshire's, was unable to attend, but Katie, who actually does the Business of the Month profile for Berkshire's, is going to sit in for Dennis and wear that hat this evening as well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. always impressed with everything you do to bring community together, so thank you for doing this. I want to start by honoring Beth's vision for this panel with a quote from Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House Emerita. I was listening. This was just a quote I heard yesterday. I was driving along, and she said, "I consider myself a weaver, and every thread is important to the tapestry. Diversity is our strength, but unity is our power." And it just really grabbed me, because there's lots of words we throw together, people who care about community, but power isn't always one of them. And I thought, she's a person, love her or hate her, she got things done. Nancy Pelosi got a lot of things done. And I think that's what I would love to walk away from this gathering with, is a sense of a powerful connection to each other and some ideas for what can we do to get things done. And I'm going to start by asking Margaret, because I think this is near and dear to everyone's heart. What are you seeing as the most urgent food access and food equity issues during this economically challenging time? And how can we as a community help ensure that everyone in our communities has access to nutritious food?
Well, I could take the easy answer or the complicated answer, but I'll go for complicated. So food access is critical. Everybody needs to eat. I think that when Berkshire Grown steps in, we're not just talking about food access. That's really not where we started. We are really about keeping farmers farming, but more and more in this area in particular, we want to keep farmers farming by feeding our community, and not just the people who can buy the food directly from the farmer at a market, but the people who can't afford it. So we do that in a number of ways. We run winter farmers markets. We ran a mobile farmers market for 3 years, but won't be running that again this year because it would require federal funding, which I don't want to mess with right now. And we do something called Farm to Food Access, which grew out of the pandemic. We had a previous program called Share the Bounty, which is still in existence. It was really clear to me and a lot of people that came together overnight in the pandemic. And I really mean overnight, like a phone call one afternoon, within 48 hours, we were getting food from all the farmers and getting it out to food pantries. It became really clear after 6 months that this was not a problem that was going to go away when the pandemic ended. So we started this program, and I think it's been effective on a number of levels. It has profoundly supported local farms, particularly when we had 3 years of federal funding. We were spending $50,000 a month with local farms and getting that food to pantries. That was incredible. We lost that funding halfway through last year, but because of people like you and some foundations, we're still spending almost 15,000 a month now. So the community has come together. This is a little bit of a long answer, but I think in this community, that is what people are aware of. One of my things is to make people aware that when we put out our guide to local food and farms, it's got beautiful photographs and listings of all the farmers, but in the middle of the guide is always a piece about food insecurity and a listing of all the brick and mortar food pantries in the whole county. I want people to know you can go to a farmer's market and you can afford that food. There are a lot of people who can't, and they're your neighbors. And I think in Berkshire County in particular, there is a connection and awareness that happens, and it's strong, and people do what they can. So money is the biggest barrier. Money is the biggest barrier to food equity and food access. Yeah. But money isn't everything. It's also awareness of the needs of your community, and I think that's not a barrier here, but it can be nationally.
So you're talking about a $35,000 a month shortfall over what you could be spending just a year ago. So given that fact, what, apart from awareness, which is very important, can you ask all of us to do to help bridge that shortfall a little bit? What would be an actionable step that people could take?
Well, I'm going to take a sidestep to talk about some of the things I'm doing on a statewide level right now, which is a learning curve so steep for me, it's almost backwards. Because we lost that LFPA funding, 40 other organizations across the state lost that funding. $14 million was what the state was getting for those 3 years, on an average over those 3 years. And a group of us came together about a year ago and said, what if we could get this money in the state budget? Because you can't touch $600,000 a year from individual donations. It needs to be government funding. But no one wants to really mess with the feds. So we've been working to get into the state budget. We're in the midst of that process right now. We didn't make it into the House budget, so I'm going to Boston on Tuesday to go visit every single senator and talk to them about the impact across the state. 630 farms were active in this program. Over 400 community sites got food across the state. We're not just talking about the Berkshires, it's everywhere. And it's amazing to go to the State House, but it's also amazing to go and talk to all the other people for whom this is profoundly effective. So, it's government. You can't touch it without government, but government won't, they say, we want to hear data and we want to hear stories.
Right. So can you imagine bringing a bunch of people in this room along? I mean, would that be helpful?
So what you all can do, if we make it into the state budget, or even if we don't, if you want to give me your email, you can email your senators right now, any senator, not just Senator Mark, any senator.
I think we're all hungry for something we can do.
And say, we think this is a really important program. We're going to show up. I don't know how, maybe Beth can give me a clue of how to give you some contacts, but that would be really important. What they want is, they respond to noise. If we're going to go and make noise in the halls and talk to everybody, pass everything out. We had a lobby day for senators and representatives that was amazing and very educational, but we have to keep the pressure on, and if voters keep that pressure on, that's really important.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for going that extra distance and really showing the vulnerability that your organization and our community has because of these changes. It's
Really,
real.
everybody. I mean, it's powerfully important for farmers and for food insecure families, which, important data, 1 in 3 families in the Berkshires experiences food insecurity, 39%.
That's really
That's
shocking.
really
Yeah.
a high number.
Well, what you were saying about the statewide effort and the state government effort echoes something that Brittany and I were chatting about, the notion of statewide coalitions. I mean, Berkshire County is a large county, it has a lot going on, but there's nothing quite like reaching out of the borders and making sure that we're learning from others and we're having more impact because we're working together. So I wanted to ask you, Brittany, can you share your thoughts on opportunities that are here in the Berkshires for young farmers and even future generations? And what are the issues of land use choices that will impact them and impact all of us?
Let's see if that works. So I'm thinking in response to this question about an experience that I had when I was apprenticing at Indian Line Farm a number of years ago. And there was this great opportunity for apprentices in the tri-state area to attend in a cohort setting workshops at farms across the region. It was a great opportunity, and one of the farmers facilitating one of these sessions said to this group of 50, 60 apprentices, how many of you next year finishing your apprenticeship or even within the next 5 years would like to own and operate your own farm? And really every hand in the audience shot up. And then they said, how many of you hold the reasonable expectation that you might be able to access land to do that in the next 5 years? And there was not a single hand raised in the audience. And that might seem like an obvious conclusion to those in this room who know that there are issues with access to even things as basic as housing, much less affordable agricultural land that reflects the productive value of that land if you don't exploit the soil or workers or break your back. And so we know that there is this issue of really, I guess, a foundational problem with just valuing land in the speculative market at a price that is completely detached from what you can actually make as a living farming it. So there's that foundational disconnect. But to the part of your question about how land use choices factor in, I think that this is something that I think about with my beat hat on regularly, specifically when we talk about issues of contamination, not just things like pesticides, but an area of work that have been undertaking at BEAT for the past 2 years is addressing the impact in our community of the Berkshires, like so many communities across the country, of the application of sewage sludge to agricultural fields. If you're not familiar with the idea of sludge, it is as gross as it sounds. It is the solid byproduct from wastewater treatment plants that contains dangerously high levels of PFAS, no matter how you slice it. The state's recent analysis of every single wastewater treatment plant in the state, if I had to guess, probably the same would be true of every plant across the country, contained levels of PFAS that are dangerous for human health. And yet we continue to allow the spreading of this contaminated substance on agricultural fields as fertilizer. We profoundly know the scientific evidence is abundantly clear that it poses risks to soil health in a permanent way. There's a reason that these are referred to as forever chemicals. We have several dozen public water supplies in the Commonwealth alone that have been contaminated with PFAS, and I have to ask myself if there's not some potential connection there. And the impacts on wildlife and human health are also very reverberating and can contaminate blood and cause numerous diseases for decades when exposed. So we've been doing public records research over the past 2 years and demonstrating the potential impact in the Berkshires, throughout the Commonwealth, and it has really hit home for me because one of the farms identified in this public records research has utilized land adjacent to our home for decades. We don't know if they have spread sludge there, but it's a possibility. And my partner and I, as was mentioned, operate a small organic farm on the side of our working lives full-time. And we've had the opportunity to potentially take over a lease for this land adjacent to our home, a real opportunity to stop the pesticide contamination we've been exposed to annually, but also to see it become a cooperative community space for young farmers. But a single test for PFAS costs over $500. This is a 10-acre field, so it would be for a young farmer entering a situation where they might have to reckon with not only the insurmountable barriers of cost, but also potentially contamination issues. It really compounds the situation. So I think the solution to that needs to be very farmer forward, seeing farmers as victims of poor state policy and working to support them with resources. But sorry, that's not more hopeful.
No, it's okay.
There is money in the state budget for mitigation.
Yeah, I could say a lot on that provision in that bill, but yeah, Senator Comerford's bill is better, but yeah.
So what would you like to see happen from community members like us? What could we do to further your aim to put young farmers first? Give them a chance. Like if you're sort of underwater as you're starting, that's not a sustainable situation.
Is your question pertaining to the PFAS issue
Yes,
specifically?
to the PFAS issue.
Yeah, so I guess thinking about this on a few echelons of potential intervention on the state level, to echo some of Margaret's comments, there are opportunities to do legislative advocacy. There's a good bill right now in the State House advanced by Senator Comerford, but beyond that, I mean, I would love to believe in the legislative cycle being able to push one bill through in any moment, but I think we have to bank on more than that. There's also regulatory pathways to dealing with this, and the Department of Environmental Protection is charged with forming regulation about this kind of thing, and they are responsible, in theory, and do on many other issues, hold public hearings, something that we've done in partnership with a national coalition and our Massachusetts State Subcommittee, our partners at Conservation Law Foundation and Northeast University, and Just Zero and other groups is we collectively presented a letter to the head of DEP saying, you need to come to the Berkshires and do presentations and legitimate community outreach that is meaningful and engaging people who might be victims of exposure to PFAS contamination, whose public water supplies might be contaminated with PFAS, who might be in environmental justice neighborhoods, and actively do outreach. But I think there's a role for community members in reaching out to DEP. These are people with email addresses and phone numbers, and I utilize them regularly. And the other thing we can do, because states like Maine have modeled a successful approach to dealing with this kind of problem. In Maine, you had a very successful civil society response paired with a really grassroots community level response that worked to pair resources so that farmers were supported in transitioning to other land or healthy feed if something had been contaminated. And I think that groups like Margaret's organization and mine and community members have a lot of room to come together and fill in the gaps where even a good bill might lack in supporting farmers in making the right choice or in accessing tools like blood testing or soil testing. So I think that there will be a lot of room for that kind of support. And I think we could push our landowning institutions to regulate on this. Even if the state will not do it, we have a lot of local institutions like land trusts, other landholding entities that could absolutely choose to regulate on what is able to be applied on their soil. And many of us could push for that.
Okay, I mean, that's very specific. I would love at some point, I don't want to give more work to Beth, but if we could start collecting some of these solutions or possible solutions and redistribute them to this community, that would be fantastic. So building on that, Jim, you are in the business of creating affordable housing for people who live here and they live on the land that we've just been talking about. Could you explain the funding mechanism that leads to land purchases in the model that you at CDCSB are using?
Sure. So we do, I guess, a variety of projects, some quite large and some quite small. I think it's interesting that we're talking about food and housing, right, and managing our resources for that. Seems like two pretty basic needs. Sounds like we might be in a slightly more advantaged position when it comes to state funding. The state, for a long time, but particularly in the past 5 years, has really leaned into producing affordable housing. And so when we do a project, we usually are working with a kind of a pot of money that came from one of two places, either donations and grants, so personal or institutional donations, or money that we've made from our developer fee, which we then, pardon the pun, plow back into our projects. So that's how we fund it. We secure property. I was just saying earlier in the lobby, we rarely get the first look at any piece of property. So by the time we're looking at it, it's usually because everybody else has taken a pass. So we can often negotiate favorable terms for how we secure the property. We try and do that with as little money as possible, and it's usually from donations or our fee.
And can you share some of the latest projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so it kind of predates me, but I think the organization was actually founded with a very specific, project, which was remediating a brownfield in downtown Great Barrington, and we've branched out from there. We're some 30 years later still in the process of remediating a brownfield.
Is that on Bridge
Street?
Yeah,
yeah, and we're making progress, but it's going to be a while longer still. Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
No, just the most recent.
Oh, our projects, yeah. So our projects are big and small.
Yeah.
So on that site, we successfully executed a 50-unit apartment building. And then after that, we did another 50-unit apartment building just south of Guido's. That was more of a townhouse type project. That was refreshingly
and
not.
How long does that take? I mean, 50 units is a lot. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
huge accomplishment. How long, what's the arc of that?
Yeah, they're big projects and they have long timelines. One of the benefits of working with the state is that they give us a lot of support in funds and favorable loans and tax credits that we get to apply to the projects. One of the drawbacks is everything takes a really long time with them. So we have a project now that we just submitted 70 units in Lee, and that has been about 18 months on leading up to this submission. The state will sit with the submission for probably about 6 months, and we may be awarded in 6 months, or we may have to go back in another year, which is actually quite common. So you got about 3 years leading up to the construction. Once you get the money, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's about 16, 18 months you're built, and then you've got your apartment, you've got your project. We're on the other end of the scale. We're doing two-family units in Egremont, because a 70-unit apartment building doesn't make a lot of sense in Egremont. And that project has been about a year in, maybe it's getting closer to a year and a half on paper and approvals. We got our permits from the town at the beginning of April, and we've picked our contractor, and we should be breaking ground by the end of the month, and we hope to be occupied by the end of the year.
I see. That's exciting pace of development.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of weaving together the expertise on this panel, can you imagine a scenario in which you and Brittany find a property that needs remediation, and there's money from the state doing that, you're building on this, and there's also acreage for farming? I mean, is there a way to think about all the needs here that are represented by all of you as a whole entity? So the Berkshires needs land for farming, it needs healthy soils for farming, and the people who work on the land, it needs food access, and it needs housing. Like, do they have to be sort of separate efforts, or are there chances for the three of you plus to make the case that we need to work together on much larger scale?
Yeah, I think there's a really convincing case for that. It almost makes itself. We were talking earlier about taking locally grown food and using it in food pantries. It'd be really nice to see it used in schools. And I think actually the Berkshires is really good at culture and conservation, and that's actually what brought me to the Berkshires, because when I moved, I could have moved anywhere, really. But we have great culture, we have great natural resources, and we're thoughtful about how we leverage those things. So as an organization, we're very excited to work with land trusts to help secure land. We're very excited to work with agricultural groups to find synergy between housing and farming, which I can talk about in a second. And we're also looking to do that with cultural groups. And we've done it in a very small way at the Thornwood, where we bought a hotel and repurposed it as an adult short-term workforce living community. So it is a place where people who work in our community and for whatever reason, need a short-term solution, which they can stay iteratively months and months and months, but if they want to stay 1 month, that's fine too. That keeps people available to work in our businesses. So I was just talking to Greenagers about the farm and the housing. To me, and I think they agree with me, if we could, a farmer, as I understand it, and believe me, there's a lot I don't understand about farming, their income comes in large quantities at periods throughout the year, but they have these troughs. And so if there was a stable source of income for them on their property, that would be beneficial to them. And they also struggle to find labor. One of the reasons they struggle to find labor is because their labor struggles to find housing. So if we could, with a land trust, secure property that was suitable for farming and take the parts of that property that maybe weren't so suitable for farming and put some number of 1 or 2 family houses on it, that then most appropriately would house people who worked on farms. But even if it doesn't, they still produce rental income. Then together we've secured land for farming, we've provided housing for people, we provided housing for farmers, and we provided income to the farmer whose land those houses sit on, so that helps sustain the farm. And every little, I think, that just you get synergies and every little bit helps.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an exciting idea. What do you guys think of this notion? Does this seem like a nice idea, but not going to happen anytime soon? Or what are your thoughts on hearing a scenario like this?
Jim and I have talked about this a lot. I don't think that we see eye to eye on all of it, but I do think that soil is where you have to start here. First of all, you don't want to have the farms on contaminated soil. So then you're looking at prime agricultural soils, and you don't want to develop those except for farmland use. So you have to think carefully about where you're going to site it. I'm sometimes internally skeptical how many farmers can afford, really honestly, afford to buy that land. So then it becomes who can afford that. Maybe a land trust buys the land and farmers lease it. So I think that you touched on it a little bit. It has to become economically creative. I have one other really depressing statistic, which is that for every dollar that farmers in Massachusetts spend, they make 95 cents. Another way to say that is they lose a nickel on every dollar they spend. So these are not,
make up for it in volume.
these are not people, these aren't people who can go buy land to develop. There are people who could afford it, but it might not be the small diversified vegetable farmer. Can I do something unorthodox here?
Yes.
I was on a hike earlier this week with Jenny Hansel, who's the executive director at Berkshire Natural Resources, and I can see her sitting right there. And she and I were talking about this. Can I ask you to just talk a little bit about what it means in terms of conservation versus development versus farming? You have some ideas that I thought were really interesting. Do you mind if I do that?
No, we have to let this go where it's going.
Hi, nice to meet you, Brittany. We haven't met yet, and hi, Jim. We have met. This is an area where BNRC is the largest land trust in Berkshire County that's focused only on Berkshire County. We care for over 27,000 acres, some of which is farmland. And we're very interested in this model of working together with housing organizations and organizations that support farmers to look broadly at the dramatically rapid loss of farmland, the fact that many farmers don't have succession plans, they don't have, their children or grandchildren aren't able to come in and take over the farms. Cosmo, one of my colleagues, is here, and he's been talking to a lot of farmers in North County right now, trying to help them think about what options are available to them. But between sort of traditional land trusts like ours and community land trusts, I think there are many models, and we're seeing them, and we're seeing land trusts like ours all over the country, and particularly in Massachusetts and the Hudson Valley, looking at opportunities to say, we talked about a golf course last year that was acres and acres of beautiful land that in that case wouldn't have been farmland, but then there was all the developed area that could have been housing, and there were obstacles that in that moment weren't surmountable enough to pursue the project. But I think there is a lot of farmland in the Berkshires where all the development already is, affordable housing could be created for the farmers. And I think there are solutions to that question of how do you make it affordable. Those ground lease models is something that a community land trust does. BNRC probably won't get into a large scale owning a lot of farmland and leasing it, but when we buy farmland and put it into conservation, that reduces the resale value for the next farmer coming in. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to do this in the Berkshires. Well, what you do is you divide it up so that there's land that is permanently conserved and can never be developed, and then there's a part over here that can be. So they call it a building envelope or an exclusion, and anybody who does a conservation restriction on their own land, typically that's how they do it. This, my 50 acres of forest can never be touched, but I also have a house, and that's going to stay there, and the next person who buys the land has to keep the 50 acres protected, but maybe there's enough excluded or in the envelope that they can build a shed on the house if they want to. And it's all
That's wonderful. Thank you for your expertise on that and for coming up and speaking with us.
Thanks, Margaret, for,
Sorry,
planting
no.
we went on and on. We were hiking a very steep trail. We would have to stop and talk, and I'd say, but wait a minute, tell me about this thing.
But Margaret, I wanted to touch on another question for you. It's related but not quite the same. This is something that came up in one of our planning conversations around this panel. So let's talk, and Jim mentioned it too, so I want to link it and see where the conversation goes. How can we get the year-round economy to leverage this sort of seasonal influx of tourists and other consumers and people bringing their wallets and their enthusiasm? What do you see as a way to extend the season, so to speak, for our local farmers?
You're looking at me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will say that Berkshire Grown runs winter farmers markets, and those were started first just November and December as holiday markets to extend the season. Now they go through April. And they're incredibly profitable to farmers who have no other way during the year. Well, that's not true. Limited ways during the winter to sell their products. A lot of our vegetable farmers now who sell at the Great Barrington Market have scaled up specifically to sell to winter farmers markets. So that extends the season. It makes it year-round. I do think, we have a love-hate relationship with the tourist economy. We all live in this beautiful place that we treasure, and we want those lovely trails where we're the only people on it, and then all these tourists come in. But they are the lifeblood that keeps the shops going and keeps people strong. So I do think that, for me, I think about this a lot at Berkshire Grown, like how do I engage both the tourist economy and the year-round residents in a commitment to buying local food, locally grown food. Like, how do you do that? It is more expensive. How do you say, well, you just have to spend more? That's kind of not a very helpful suggestion. There is a multiplier study, which I printed up, but I don't know I'll say it out, the whole thing. But if you think about, instead of spending more money, just adjusting your budget, just shifting $5 a month in the state of Massachusetts, if everybody just shifted, $5 a week, you could do that over a month and buy one organic local chicken. You could do it however you want. The multiplier effect is $266 million per year would be created to benefit local economies. $266 million just by everybody, just shifting $5 and buying locally. 6,500 new jobs and over 1.14 billion servings of fresh local food, increasing public health, because fresh food is more nutritious. So this is Berkshire Grown's job, is to promote farmers and local farms and getting people to eat local food, but it's a tough nut to crack. It's hard to convince people to buy the local eggs, the local meat, the local food that is going to be more expensive. So they have to make a choice.
Yeah.
My husband and I have this all the time. He loves to cook and eat and shop, and he brings home raspberries in February, and I'm like, where did those come from? Oh, Chile, interesting. But they did taste really good. But I would rather just have those little red jewels when they're from here. Like, for me, that's an easy choice. For him, it's not a choice he wants to make.
Right, but you're just teeing it up that it is a choice. We can be more conscious.
It's a choice,
Yeah.
and I think it's not just, it's kind of like, it's a lifestyle. I hate that word, but it's a lifestyle habit that you have to develop. Kind of like, I think of, 30 years ago, nobody recycled anything. That wasn't part of our everyday habit. You had to think about it. You had to really work hard. You had to take it to the recycling center. Now every kitchen design center has a recycling drawer, and there's curbside recycling, well, maybe not in rural places, but in a lot of other places. It's just part of our life. How do we make buying locally grown food not a choice, not something you have to think about? It's just part of your life. And that's what I want to do.
Yeah. In the winter, it's harder, though, here, isn't it? I mean, so we have some, maybe we're talking about more winter farmers markets, more year-round thinking about access to what our farmers are growing in their greenhouses over winter. I just think, for me, I've been here for 5.5 years, and I'm still putting together what all the resources are. So this is part of it, is raising awareness, making sure people know. That's why I write for Berkshires on a monthly basis, because there's so many people in our community willing to do a lot with a little. Like, I see that all the time. I just interviewed Jamie Goldenberg from Heart GB, and she is very aware that she could make more money in a larger market for her fabric and textile business. But she says she considers taking Berkshires and being here as part of her personal profit. And it was a great term, and I want to celebrate that, because there is a kind of personal profit. And I think not everyone can consciously make that choice and still make their business model work. But I think we need to be thinking about, in a way, that it's not all or nothing. It's a moving target as far as where does our personal bucket of money go. So I love the idea of that metric where a little shift, $20 a month toward the local market, can make this exponential, this enormous impact. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we are impactful. Each one of us has an incredible role to play. And I want to swing back to Brittany. We had talked a little bit about the community working together, because that's really the theme of what we're doing, addressing big systemic challenges like energy affordability. Because you're in the environmental field, you probably can advise us, are there better ways for us to be consuming energy? Are there communal solar panels we can get? What's going on in your world as far as making clean energy affordable?
Yeah, what's going on in the world of Beat now is fighting a lot of gas pipelines, but also fighting for clean energy. So maybe I can also think again on those three levels of legislative angles for action, regulatory possibilities, and then, since most of us don't want to just speak legalese or bureaucratic language, also thinking about what is accessible on the community level and as individuals. So on the legislative angle, I would say that, even this legislative cycle has seen, frankly, bad bills like the Cusack energy affordability bill, which had some really good language and some real poison pills that wanted to roll back our climate commitments, our 2030 and 2050 climate commitments. I think, as we are all perceiving in light of current events, clean energy is actually cheap, and fossil fuels are volatile and subject to all kinds of shocks, from international market turbulence to governance decisions on the part of fossil fuel companies. And so a big part of what we can do on the legislative side is to protect those climate commitments and protect our state's investment in a transition to clean energy. There was also recently in the House another energy bill that was passed on the House side that would cut $1 billion in support for mass save improvements. This is kind of a false affordability solution, in my opinion. I think that keeping people trapped in the volatility of fossil fuel markets is really a way of preventing people, especially the most vulnerable community members, to those shocks from being able to have more self-reliance on clean energy. On the regulatory side, we've seen that in recent months too. I recently attended a Berkshire Gas rate hike hearing in which Berkshire Gas was proposing that next year they would raise rates by 23%, which is crazy, but nothing compared to Liberty, a utility further east that was proposing raising rates next year by 55%. I'm grateful that we have a strong Department of Public Utilities right now, and that they came to the Berkshires to ask people, what do you think about that? And really received feedback. But I think that as much as many of us might not be accustomed to relating to the Department of Public Utilities, this is actually an agency that provides a different avenue for doing the kind of advocacy related to energy affordability that can really be of help to people. So at BEAT, we try and we write guides to making public comments and participating in these sometimes bureaucratic, complex processes so that people understand, for example, if we just decide as a state that we think that investor-owned utilities simply shouldn't make such a large profit, we could actually really make a dent in some of our affordability strides. So that would be the regulatory side. And then on the individual and community level, I think a lot about some of the individual and community decisions that we make about our own energy consumption as a form of collective care. One of the campaigns we've been leading for the past several years in the Berkshires is to decarbonize the 3 peaking power plants in this county. We've successfully advocated for and achieved the decarbonization of 2 of the 3 of them, and there's 1 remaining in an environmental justice neighborhood of Pittsfield. Peaking power plants run when the grid is at moments of highest stress, high demand. So when everyone is turning on their air conditioning or running electrical appliances during cold events. So a way of performing collective care is also to have demand response to those events and to do some advocacy to try to force the plants to shut down that are emitting things like, actually Pittsfield Generating just a few weeks ago was fined $21,500 for exceedances in its ammonia discharges and NOx. So some of what we're doing that calls on community response is we have neighbors in Pittsfield who call us when they think that they might be running too loudly, and we call the zoning enforcement officer, and we call DEP, and we go out there with their air quality meters, and we try to take these readings and get them. So that's one form. But then also, we're trying to work on building a community-owned community solar project in Pittsfield. We're in the very early stages of figuring out how this could be operationalized in this community, and not just have community solar that, yes, improves rates for people, but actually builds equity for people and is owned by the community, much in the style of community land trust.
Well, you're getting a lot done.
Yeah, we are small but mighty.
That's really, really impressive. Well, my last question before we can open up the floor to questions from the audience is to Jim. I'm going to kick it back to you. I didn't prepare this question, but as we were talking, so building is expensive, and we need more housing. What's going on with the notion of auxiliary dwellings? Can you inform us about that? And is that, from your vantage point as an architect, are these truly affordable options for homeowners with a little extra land to build an auxiliary dwelling? I just want to hear from your experiences. Is this a real solution?
Yeah, but first, can I talk about solar?
Yes, you can talk about solar, absolutely.
So, interestingly, the project we're doing in Lee, really most of our projects, but that project, since it's fresh in my mind, it's got a rooftop full of solar, and in addition, it is a passive house standard of insulation. So, electricity is expensive for everybody. Actually, that building has almost no carbon fuel. We had to keep it for backup generators. And all that is actually incentivized by the state. So I do think there are ways in which they're really working towards, very positively towards these goals. But that's just if electricity is expensive for everybody, and it's especially expensive for people who are struggling to pay rent. So it's a really smart investment in that building to make it really well insulated so we don't need that much energy, and then to put solar on top so that we can, have preferred pricing on electricity. So that is one small way we can do something local. The ADU is really interesting. It's also, sort of complex because it's not just, it could be, depends on what you want out of it. Your question was, is it affordable or reasonable for someone to put one on their piece of property? It would depend on what their goals were. So the state has gotten behind ADUs in a couple ways. One, they've made it so that you can just do it on your property. And I think that's really important because what it's saying is, in a world where land is scarce and we need to think about managing that resource, wherever we have development, we can have more density, right? And so that's actually really smart because chances are you're closer to a supermarket and closer to a job or whatever. So your infrastructure is already there, your electricity is already there, your well or town water is already there, your town sewer or septic field is already there. So it's a very smart way to make, it's just a little incremental difference, but if we go back to the $20 a week, if a lot of people made these ADUs, there would be a lot more housing on the market. And if people did the ADUs as market rate ADUs, that would still help because there'd be more housing on the market. So the market, more supply means the demand is less and the price will naturally migrate down. The state's doing another thing, which is they're making cheap money available to ADUs in the form of loans if you're willing to restrict them to make them affordable. So that's a way in which to then bring that element to it. So I think it's potentially very powerful. Where it suffers is economy of scale, because it's true if everybody or 1 out of 10 people or 1 out of 20 people in the state would do it, it'd make a big difference. But for each person, that's like a learning curve, and the return on investment, and not necessarily even dollar investment, but mental investment and learning what you have to do and getting it done is slight. So
could the CDCSB create a bit of a template or a modular home design?
Funny you should say. Well, I mean, we're not the only ones, but so we're working this project we're doing in Egremont is with modular houses, and one of the companies we were talking to, they have like kind of a perfected 800 square foot 2-bedroom house that they will put anywhere you ask them to. And I toured a few of them in, I think both were in Pittsfield, actually. One was at the very north end of Pittsfield, one was at the very south end of Pittsfield. And they seemed like quality housing solutions, and one was being done in conjunction with Milltown Capital, and one was being done in conjunction with just a private homeowner.
And these are all, for New England winters. Like a lot of in the modular homes that started were in the Southwest, or so they've been, in your mind, they're adequate, and they'll last.
So I often wonder why I chose to be an architect in the Northeast, but you have to do a lot to make our buildings robust enough for winter. But I walked through these houses, and they weren't luxurious, but they were completely adequate, and they weren't. I don't mean to missell it. They were totally fine. If that was where I was living, I would be quite comfortable. The price, the state is loaning $250,000. These projects, I think, were done a little closer to $280,000. That number is going to keep moving. Unfortunately, the state loan is at $250. It will be at $250 next year. It'll be at $250 the year after till they get around to raising that.
Do you know what the rate of paying back the loan is? The interest rate?
I haven't run a spreadsheet on it, but I would imagine, $250 is got to be, well, it depends on what your interest rate is, but it's a few thousand a month probably if you were mortgaging the whole thing. And I guess you could probably charge that in rent, and you might zero it out. So, and you'd be building equity. So that
Yes.
in
So
its purest form.
The property owner builder is building the equity.
Yeah, well, if you're paying off a mortgage,
Yeah.
yeah. And if you invested the money, if you bought it for cash, you probably, depending on where you were, you can make market rate on it. I would imagine, like everything else in the Berkshires and real estate, that the numbers are marginal. And that's actually one of our biggest challenges here, is that plywood costs the same here as it does in Boston, but rent first off, salaries are higher in Boston, rents are more expensive, so when you're looking at penciling out a project, works a lot better in Boston, and that's why they're building a lot more houses in Boston than they are here.
Right. Well, I want to sort of wrap up this phase of the conversation and make sure we're hearing from our community. So please feel free to come up to the mic and ask the panel anything that's on your mind. I think it'll be easier for everyone in the room to hear if you come to the mic. But also just any quick last words from the panel members, which you guys have been sharing incredibly insightful ideas, concepts, opportunities. I want to thank you all for doing that. It's really wonderful. Any questions? Yeah, got somebody.
Sorry, I got to take this. I'm the sound engineer.
Yeah.
It's not a question, it's a statement. If you have never smelled sewage sludge, it's the final stage of a wastewater treatment plant. It's the stuff that they can't process. It's the sludge that's left over. If you smell that, I promise you have never in your life smelt something so horrible. It's utterly appalling. Just being behind one of the trucks, just a truck going by, will stench the town for hours. It's absolutely unbelievable. And last time I went by one, there was a line of cars behind the convoy. It's like tanker trucks and the really long tractor trailer trucks that I don't know how much they can carry. They're like 6 dump trucks in one with no cover. I mean, the stuff's just heaped up over the top. There's no cover. It's horrendous. The stuff is like coming off in the wind. They're really traveling down the road. And I just want to let you know that that's going on. And even more, I live in the town of Hancock, which is about 45 minutes north of here. And just up the road from me, there's a place, and I will name it, called Ioka Farm. They are not organic, and they were spraying stuff that it was so intense you didn't want to breathe it. Like it felt like it was going to hurt your lungs, and it smelled.
We are gathering you are not a fan of the practice.
Oh, are you kidding? And I'll just say I'll wrap up, so that I'll leave it for somebody else to talk. Whatever those chemicals were, it was very much like asphalt or like driveway sealer. If you stuck your nose right into the container of driveway sealer and then followed it with fertilizer smells altogether,
I don't
and
think
make
we
your
want
eyes
this near
water.
our food.
No, and this
I could
farm.
offer,
Yeah.
unless you have another
It's-
thought, but
no,
I
it's
could
just a
offer something
statement.
hopeful.
Yeah, it's a statement.
Okay, so let me counter, yes, bad. And,
Yeah, real bad.
and let me let me add to that, and also there's emerging science about the airborne toxicity of sludge and all these things. We don't want it. So a positive development is that at the end of last year, you might have seen coverage in the Eagle about the wastewater treatment district in North County, the Hoosick Water Quality District, weighing a proposal advanced by the board, which is made up of representatives from 2 towns, to import sludge from other towns to lower bills. And people came out in droves who maybe had never heard of sludge or the fact that it was being produced but long before then and exported to other communities to oppose the proposal. And BEAT became involved at that juncture. I was so inspired hearing people's public comments during that hearing, and we thought, maybe the fact that a bunch of people have gotten politicized around this issue could give us a launching pad to work with community activists in Williamstown, where this became a big conversation just by virtue of the fact that that had happened, and work with them to try and introduce a bylaw that would ban the land application of sludge on a municipal level. I'm not saying it should happen on a municipal level or a county level or a state level. The federal government should be moving on this, and there are some developments there too. But it is nonetheless a powerful message for a town to take steps toward that. It sends a message to our state. It sends a message to regional governments that why is a town taking action on this as an issue that they see as so urgent? And we're very proud that the bylaw we worked with community activists in Williamstown to write is going to be on their warrant, I think in 2 weeks at town meeting, and it was unanimously supported by their select board. So we're grateful to those activists and proud that that would be the first ban in the state of Massachusetts if it's passed.
Fantastic.
Can I follow up just a little bit on that? These trucks are going from north to south. The next town north from me is Williamstown. That's where these trucks are coming from. I don't know if they're coming from more north, like Vermont or something, but there aren't any towns more north of Williamstown. So that's where they're coming from, and I'm done. I'll let you guys.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you for your interest in that. Anyone else want to ask the panel a question before we wrap up? Beth, do you have any last comments? Or you have, oh, can't see. Oh, please come up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annalisa. Should I take this off the stand or just?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, perfect. I'm interested in all of these issues, of course, deeply passionate about many of them, but I'm really interested in the affordable housing and auxiliary dwelling aspect, particularly thinking about the cooperative that I co-run, Manos Unidas, Multicultural Educational Cooperative, and over the years, knowing so many of our immigrant Latino community members and other struggling community members, really, a lot of them are, the housing costs are very prohibitive for everyone, but they're much more prohibitive for people who have other barriers. And so I'm just thinking to myself, the auxiliary housing idea is probably a great idea to increase housing in the state, and definitely could be lucrative for the landowner eventually, perhaps. But I'm also thinking to myself, what if we also had kind of a cooperative model, almost like a land trust idea somewhere mixed in, where maybe there are people who have more resources than they may need, and they offer a section of their land, a corner of their land, to be developed by someone in kind of a cooperation approach, like as something that essentially maybe becomes the property of both the landowner and the person maybe actually helping build the dwelling. I'm just thinking to myself, I think we need to think creatively about what can create sustainable and, flourishing lives. And our immigrant people in this county are absolutely more than essential, and we love them, and they're part of us, and many of us realize that, some of us don't. But I'm just thinking that to myself, and I'm curious if, also the other question around that is, you talked about a $250,000 house, which for some people may seem, a drop in the bucket. But for those who don't have a developed credit and stuff like that, that may be quite a lot. So I'm thinking, are there perhaps tinier options? How big is, or how should I say, how small is available? Like how small can you go on an auxiliary dwelling? Because for instance, my one of my daughters who lives in Alaska, she is taking a totally different approach, and she's actually building her own cabin right now, and she's only 20. So like, how can we maybe think in kind of outside the box terms for, you know, this gen and everyone?
These are good questions.
Yeah.
I think
Which
maybe
addresses-
Jim, I'm going to ask you to first weigh in on this really interesting question.
Yeah, so there was a lot of questions in there. The simplest one to answer is the 800 square feet is the upside limit, so it could be smaller. But an important thing to remember is if a 800 square foot house costs $250,000, a 400 square foot house is not going to cost $125,000. It's going to cost more like probably like $175,000, just because you still need a foundation, you still need a kitchen, you still need a bathroom. But so, you know, I think you're talking about synergies, and, you know, I guess it's crazy that we're in a time where I have to do this, but let me stop and say, yes, it's a country built on immigrants. We you know, should support them. So thank you for what you do. So the synergies, you know, trying to find a way to weave things together to make a project work, which often, you know, pulling sources of money from different places and funding from different places and loans from different places. I've thought about maybe there's a way with a town that's willing to give some first-time home buyer support to a home buyer that's willing to then lease their right to an ADU to another organization that might come and build that house. And if that organization, potentially the CDC, was partnered with another organization that was willing to guarantee, you know, you were talking about the rents, and, you know, if as an organization you could pitch together and say, well, we'll find you someone who's going to live here and we'll guarantee that their rent gets paid, then that becomes a very compelling model, because most of the risk on the owner side, the investment, the upfront investment, and most of the risk is taken away, plus the whole problem with how do I actually get that done is taken away. And then on the operations side, you know, the risk, the tenant being found and the rent being guaranteed, and you get out of it. You know, if we could do this in 10 houses, you've got 10 units to put your constituency in. So those sorts of solutions could be really compelling. I'm actually talking with some people who live in Stockbridge, and they're interested in starting their own kit building house business. Not very eloquently said, sorry. And their premise is that it can be built by the person who purchases the kit. They don't have to be a professional. And if I'm thinking of ways to marry that with affordable housing, and maybe, you know, not unlike the Habitat model, but if we could produce that kit locally and use that as a source of vocational training in our schools, right? Like the way the food and the schools, and the food and the pantries go together, and then those kids can actually be trained by our aging and retiring carpenters, electricians, and plumbers. And the product that, as a result, gets built on site and is used for affordable housing. I mean, we're training a workforce. We're letting people phase out of a workforce. We're supporting someone buying their house. We're supporting affordable housing. We're supporting an immigrant population. It starts to snowball.
Yeah, yay. Well, this is the kind of weaving together that we're here to talk about, and I know we only have so much time to whet the appetite, but I think you can see that if we in our own worlds come up with possibilities, we have organizations we can go to and speak about our ideas, and I think, sometimes the answers are, this is not possible, but this other thing is. So it's just a conversation. I think we need to keep the conversation going, not just once a year or twice a year, but all the time. And it's really fascinating for me what's come out of this conversation. So thank you very much, Brittany and Margaret and Jim. This has been really interesting. Yeah. Okay.
We're not done.
We're not done.
Thank you, and if there's not time, that's totally okay.
That's okay.
I'm Emily from the Conway School of Planning and Design, and I'm just wondering what the role of public planning is in each of your efforts, and maybe that's municipal or regional or statewide, and maybe it only applies to certain projects, and where opportunity is for the planning world to kind of strengthen and lift up your efforts.
Could you just say again the what School of Planning and Design?
Conway.
Conway, thank you.
Yeah.
I can answer that because I work with BRPC, I feel like every day, and I hugely respect Berkshire Regional Planning Commission and counterparts throughout the state who are planners. I think there's a great example just down the road from here about how planning efforts can complement, in my case, environmental efforts, but I'm sure the same could be said of food or housing. You have in Housatonic this underutilized park space called Old Maids Park. There's a lot of invasives, overgrowth, and a lot of people, even though it's a very walkable park space, are not necessarily familiar with using it as a place to go and get cool on the hottest days of summer. And the town of Great Barrington, its planners, did the great job of seeking out funding from the state from what is referred to as a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant to look at that space and think about how we could better serve the climate resilience and social resilience needs of the community that abuts it, including an affordable housing project that is walkable to this space. And BEAT has been commissioned to do community outreach work, and we are approaching community members who live adjacent to this site and would ostensibly be able to get cool there on a hot summer day, swim, enjoy fishing, recreation, go there as a quiet space. And our job is just to ask people, how would you like to see this space? What is your vision for it? And to do that over a series of months. And so the connection between the planners teeing it up to have an opportunity for meaningful community engagement, to pause and do that deeply in several languages, in different settings, with on-site visits and surveys and deep discussions, and then to use the results of what is learned about real community desires to go and do shovels in the ground work with landscape designers who will interpret that qualitative information into what will hopefully be a better, beautiful park space.
I'm going to jump onto that too. BRPC, Berkshire Regional Planning, has been a resource for Berkshire Grown in a lot of different ways, but in an ongoing way. They do a lot of surveys and assessments and create reports that are crucial to us when we're applying for a grant. We can call them and ask them for the information and they'll find it, but you get educated so you know where to go and look for it. And that data makes a huge difference when you're applying for a government grant, to be able to cite something from a reliable source. So planning is a big part, even though it doesn't seem like it would be a part of farming or food access, it does actually play a big role.
Fantastic.
I just have one thing to say.
My name is Krystyna Kurzyca, and I used to be on Great Barrington Affordable Housing Committee, and we were working on ADU, and we had funds for people who would like to build the ADU, and nobody was interested. So and it was probably 50,000 for each person. It just financially. Of course, we were about affordable housing, so they would have to commit themselves to be affordable, those ADU. Financially, it didn't work. Right now, the cheapest house, even, pre-built, whatever, is 250,000, and then they would have to charge less to be affordable. So just to everybody who thinks about ADU as a choice, there is no interest in ADU in owners community. So,
thank you.
There's limited interest. It's happening, but not as fast as we'd like.
It's growing.
Well, maybe. I mean,
That would be the positive
maybe.
way of looking at it.
It could be. It could be. I mean, And, if I was going to, planning to me is a very technical architectural term, but I mean, we're smart people. If we put our minds to things, we can come up with solutions. And, at a town level, a zoning code is a group of people's best idea of how this organism that we call our town is going to work together. And, it's a living thing. And as soon as you put it on paper, it's sort of obsolete. And then the next time around, maybe it gets a little better.
Yes.
I just want to say that I think we can get out of the box a little more even around the 80 thing because, in the example, I'm a landowner. I'm planning on putting an ADU on my property, and the way that I am going to be able to do that is a barn raising type thing.
Yeah.
I have multiple people through all these years of doing cooperative work who are willing to do the work for free in exchange for creating community and building some kind of a model idea. So I think, maybe we need to get back to some of those things, certainly not, yeah. I think we need to get back to the things that work. And some of those things about barn raising and community-led initiatives really make things possible.
Yeah, if everybody does a little, we get a lot done.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a comment about to go back to the planning and the way that, maybe perhaps you can work with planners. I was a little dismayed to not hear any of you talk about approaching your local planning boards, because I'm on the planning board here, and I can tell you that we can pull a lot of strings and we can change zoning, because zoning, it might be a reflection of what our communities want, but in my opinion is what our communities wanted, and it does not really serve what our communities needs.
Yeah.
So I would encourage all of you to talk
Come
to
and
me,
find you, Pedro.
or wherever you are in Sheffield or wherever, go talk to your planning board. I'll give you an example I had about 5 years ago, and this is a great policy that nobody's taken advantage of. So I challenge you, Jim, and maybe Margaret, and maybe the trust with Off the Shelf now, where I was approached by a farmer saying that, they had this huge piece of land, but they could only put a couple units of housing on it. So we ran through, and I personally stewarded a policy in Great Barrington, where if you run a farm, you can build ADUs that are up to 800 square feet on your property, unlimited amounts of them, as long as they are for your employees, people that work on the farms. Nobody's taking advantage of it. I think maybe that's part of the town's fault for not publicizing that more, but it just gives you an example of the kind of things that we can do locally.
But you should connect me with that guy, because that'd be a project we'd at least like to examine as to whether it would work.
Well, he's right. It's just zoning that, most zoning will allow. Well, in Great Barrington, we've done a great job, and I like to joke with people this year we didn't have any zoning at town meeting because our zoning is now perfect.
Yeah.
But it's not. But, now you can have up to 3 units by right on your lot. You can do 4 units with special permit, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Before you can only do 1 unit. When I came to town.
That's a 2-family and an ADU makes 3. Is that how you're getting to the as of right?
You can build 3 full-size homes. They can be 8,000 square feet each if you can fit them on your land. You still have to conform to zoning, height and bulk and setbacks and all that stuff. But you can build as much as you can fit on your land.
As long as it's going to be for farm laborers, is that what you're saying?
No. This is just on.
This is just in general.
On farmland, you can build as many ADUs as you want. You can't build, but an 800 square foot home. That's Levittown. That's like the backbone of the housing of the country, post World War II. So,
right.
But somebody asked a question about it.
Isn't there a risk of that getting exploited though? Suddenly have a contract.
Well, exploited what? I'm sorry.
Well, someone could buy the farm and say they're building the housing for farmers, and then just put up a bunch of houses.
But
I think is the question,
that.
right?
No, but it wouldn't be able. The zoning would not allow that. So if Well, somebody would exploit it to the degree that they don't get reported. So seriously.
Because Pedro's coming for him.
But when,
Well, that's how people operate here, it's like they do things and wait for somebody to complain.
Well, when I hear things like that, I always say, well, what's the alternative to do nothing, right? There are going to be, you build 6, 7, 8, 10 different little ADUs on a farm, you're going to make that farm more viable for that farmer because they'll be able to offer housing to their workers.
Yeah, connect me with that guy, please.
Well, he's right up the street.
was it
right over
Sean?
there. Sorry?
Is it Sean?
It was Sean.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, that's the outcome that I think we were all hoping for, is that by having a discussion, new connections are being made. So I'm very happy to hear you asking Pedro for a connection. That's fantastic. That's what we hope for. I think it's time for us to go informally get something, a drink, a lemonade, some snacks, and chat with our community members here. Beth, do you have anything you want to round out the conversation with?
Just one more appeal. Everybody's got these on your chairs. Please join the Berkshire Community Land Trust. It makes a real difference for us to be able to do the work that we're doing. And then I just really want to thank Katie for all the work that she did to put this together. It was really amazing. You did a stellar job and took a huge weight off my shoulders. Took my sort of crazy vision and actually made it cohesive. And then just let's do a big round for the panelists. Thank you.